The knock at the door came just after sunrise. 3 heavy raps that rattled the cabin walls and pulled me out of the kind of sleep only a mountain night can give. My first thought was a delivery gone wrong. But when I stepped onto the porch, the view nearly stopped my heart. 3 patrol cars idled in the driveway, lights flickering faintly in the early dawn. And in front of them stood Karen, our oversized, self-crowned HOA president, her arms folded across her chest like a conqueror surveying a captured fortress. She wasn't alone. 2 uniformed officers flanked her, their stances rigid but their faces hesitant, as if even they weren't entirely sure why they were there. Karen's voice cut through the crisp air, shrill and commanding. This family is in violation of neighborhood bylaws. They're refusing membership in the HOA. Today, that ends. My father, already on the porch behind me, clenched his jaw. But it was my grandfather who made the floorboards creak as he stepped out last. At 82, his back was still straight as a rifle, his eyes sharp beneath white brows that had seen more battles than Karen could ever dream. She didn't recognize him at first, just another old man in flannel pajamas, but to me, he was the strongest shield we had. "This isn't your land," Karen barked, her chin lifted arrogantly. "By county ordinance and association rules, your property falls under our governance. If you won't comply, these officers will enforce the law." The word law stung. I knew the truth. Our family's land predated her entire development by nearly a century. We had title deeds older than her bylaws. But Karen had been escalating her harassment for months, sending fines, threats, even strangers posing as inspectors. Now she had gone nuclear, twisting the police into her personal weapons. One of the officers cleared his throat, his voice unsure. "Ma'am, is this an official dispute? We don't usually get called for HOA issues." Karen snapped her fingers at him like he was a waiter. "Do your job. Remove these squatters." Grandpa didn't move at first. He just watched her, calm and deliberate, the way a hawk studies prey. Then he stepped forward, his voice a deep rumble that made even the officers straighten unconsciously. "Young lady," he said slowly, "do you know who you're speaking to?" Karen rolled her eyes, the gesture exaggerated and dripping with disdain. "Another old man who thinks he's above the rules. Spare me." That was when Grandpa reached into his jacket pocket for a weapon, but for a leather case so worn it looked like it had traveled through wars. He flipped it open, revealing a card embossed with stars and eagles. "Retired General, United States Army." The officer's eyes widened immediately. They stiffened to attention before they could even stop themselves. Instincts drilled into them from training rising above confusion. Karen, however, scoffed. "What? You think a little military nostalgia exempts you? This is a homeowner's matter, not a battlefield." Her words were meant to cut, but they only showed how blind she was. Grandpa's gaze never wavered. "I commanded men who bled for this country, who stood against dictators and bullies alike. And you think you can come to my family's doorstep with fabricated authority?" His voice grew sharper, slicing the morning air. "You've crossed from harassment into fraud. And these officers are about to realize they've been misused." The taller officer glanced at his partner, unease rippling through both. "General, is this true? Do you own this property outright?" Grandpa didn't answer with papers, at least not yet. Instead, he nodded to me. I ran inside and returned with a folder thick with documents. Every deed and plat map we had safeguarded for generations. When the officers thumbed through them, their brows furrowed deeper with every page. It was undeniable. our cabin was private. Sovereign land. Never subject to Karen's shiny new HOA. That should have been the end of it. But Karen doubled down, her face turning crimson as she shrieked. You think a few old papers change reality? I make the rules here. Without the HOA, this neighborhood would be chaos. Her voice cracked, but she kept pushing. And then came the twist none of us expected. From the tree line, a figure emerged slowly, our neighbor. Quiet Mr. Rodriguez, who everyone thought was just a retired mechanic. But in his hand, he held a small camcorder, its red light blinking. He had filmed the entire confrontation from the moment Karen arrived. And when he stepped closer, his words cut through her tirade. This isn't the first family she's threatened. I've been recording everything. The county's going to see this. The news will see this. Karen's face crumbled. The officers, their patience finally snapped, turned on her with a level of authority she hadn't anticipated. Ma'am, the taller one said firmly, you misrepresented this as a legal enforcement. That's obstruction and misuse of law enforcement resources. Step back now. She sputtered, waving her clipboard like a shield. But no one listened anymore. For the first time, Karen looked small despite her size, her bluster unraveling in the cold dawn light. And as Grandpa stood unshaken before her, his presence larger than any uniform she could fake, I realized the battle had shifted. The predator had been exposed, and the prey was finally free to roar. The moment Karen realized her grip was slipping, her voice shifted from command to desperation. She tried appealing to the officers, insisting that the neighborhood depended on her leadership, that without her HOA the place would descend into ruin. But every word she spoke only revealed her panic, her tone trembling and hollow. The officers no longer looked at her as an authority, they looked at her as a liability. The taller one pulled out his radio and quietly requested a supervisor to the scene. That was the beginning of her collapse. Grandpa didn't shout, didn't gloat. He simply folded his arms across his chest, a granite statue of dignity and restraint. Karen, he said evenly, in my life, I have stared down men who thought their power was absolute. Every one of them believed their rules outweighed justice. Do you know what became of them? She didn't answer. His eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to steel. They fell, just as you will fall. The supervisor arrived 20 minutes later, a county sheriff who took one look at the deeds, the recording, and the way the officers stood at attention for Grandpa. And he understood immediately. His words to Karen were blunt. You've wasted our time, lied about jurisdiction, and put my men in a dangerous position. That is criminal misrepresentation. You're coming with me. Karen exploded, thrashing and screaming as the sheriff tried to cuff her. This is my neighborhood. You can't arrest me in my own kingdom. Her shrill protest carried down the road, waking neighbors who peeked out from behind curtains and porches. For the first time, they weren't afraid of her, they pitied her. Even laughed at the sight of the self-proclaimed queen reduced to a spectacle in handcuffs. But the story didn't end in the driveway. Once news spread of the arrest, residents began pouring out with stories of their own. Families Karen had fined into debt. Homeowners she had threatened with foreclosure for trivial landscaping disputes. Even veterans she had mocked for refusing to repaint mailboxes. The county investigation widened into a state probe, and soon financial records revealed she had siphoned HOA funds into personal accounts, spent thousands on private security enforcers, and doctored signatures on community votes. The empire she built on intimidation was nothing but rot beneath the surface. And now every beam of light was exposing it. The twist came at the town hall meeting 2 months later. Karen's trial was underway, and while she fought tooth and nail, her allies abandoned her. At that meeting, the county commissioner announced sweeping reforms. The HOA would be dissolved, its assets frozen, and a community cooperative led by residents rather than rulers would take its place. The announcement drew a standing ovation. But what broke me was seeing who stood at the front of the applause. Mrs. Franklin. The widow Karen had once tried to evict over her backyard flag, stood there with tears in her eyes, thanking my grandfather. She clutched his hand like he had saved her world. And in many ways, he had. The sentencing was final. Karen received 6 years for fraud, misuse of authority, and obstruction. When the gavel fell, she slumped into her chair. All the grandeur and arrogance drained away. The woman who once strutted down our road with a clipboard and an army of threats was nothing but a shell. Her empire reduced to dust. I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the fear she had sown, the children she made cry, the families she tormented. Her downfall wasn't cruelty, it was justice. Grandpa, though, didn't celebrate. On the porch of our cabin after it all ended, he simply stared at the horizon. Power is a dangerous drug, he said softly. Give it to someone without discipline, and they'll turn neighbors into enemies. Give it to someone with honor, and they'll turn strangers into family. His words sank deep into me. That cabin wasn't just wood and stonite, was a reminder that dignity, truth, and justice always outlast false power. In the months that followed, our community transformed. Neighbors once too afraid to speak began sharing meals, repairing fences together, creating something real out of the wreckage Karen had left behind. And through it all, Grandpa became the quiet figure at the center, not leading with control, but with example. His rank as a retired general carried weight, but his humility carried more. He had fought wars abroad, and now he had helped win peace at home. Karen thought she could bend the law, twist authority, and bully her way into control. Instead, she became a lesson the entire town will never forget. Power seized unjustly is power that devours itself. And truth, no matter how long it takes, will always rise like dawn over the mountains. So I leave you with this story. And I ask, was Karen's punishment enough? Or should people like her face even harsher consequences when they abuse power?